Okay, this is take 4 of the phonology presentation. Estimated target time 10 minutes or less. Here we go. Hello, thank you all. My name is Julian Gutierrez and I will be talking about diphthong transfer. More specifically, how the Colombian learners, whose mother language is Spanish, can successfully acquire the adequate pronunciation of English diphthongs. Although they are separated by their linguistic classifications, English being a Germanic language and Spanish a Romance language, these are languages that more often than not approach the same feature in different ways. One of these phenomena is manifested in the way diphthongs work in both languages. The aim of this presentation will be to understand the differences between English and Spanish diphthongs, their effects upon pronunciation teaching for Spanish-speaking learners, and how can teachers handle these effects to foster an effective acquisition. A diphthong is a phonological feature that is present in many languages, including English and Spanish. Abercrombie, in 1967, defined it as a vowel of a continually chasing quality. A diphthong is a vocalic articulation between a nucleus and a glide, or a glide and a nucleus. In some languages, the order nucleus-glide can change from glide to nucleus. We will see how this works in the comparison between the two languages later. The articulation within the same syllable is a defining feature of the diphthong. That is, that the diphthong must occur within a given syllable in order to be considered as such. Otherwise, we have just two different vowels in two different syllables. Diphthongs in English can be classified mostly according to their location or the ending vowel, having a glide nucleus movement. In English we have 8 diphthongs that can be classified whether they end up in an I, in an E, a schwa, or an U. 3 ending in an E, 3 ending in a schwa, and 2 ending in an U. In Spanish, the classification gets a little wider. Martínez Eldrón, Fernández Planas, and Carreras Abate classified Spanish diphthongs by the placement of nucleus and glide. So we have 8 rising diphthongs and 6 falling diphthongs according to this classification. The rising diphthongs will have the nucleus at the beginning, and the falling diphthongs will have it at the end. The rising diphthongs are the ones who have an E at the beginning, such as piel, Asia, radio, viuda, or an U, fuimos, bueno, cuadro, cuota. And the following diphthongs are the ones who have an E or an U at the ending, peine, aire, soy, neutro, pausa, bow. So we have that the differences are both in quality and quantity and quality. In quantity, because Spanish has a larger number of diphthongs compared to English. In quality, the differences can be described in 3 levels. First of all, nucleus placement, as we have seen in the rising-falling classification of Spanish. The differences related to the vocalic repertoire, and differences related to the fact that related to the absence of vowel reduction in Spanish. The vocalic repertoire is very important because Spanish diphthongs are constructed through sounds that do not exist in the Spanish phonology, so this is an issue that must be taken into consideration. The vowel reduction in Spanish is a feature that does not exist. In English, it exists and it's a very common feature that helps connected speech. So these 3 quality differences that are the ones that have the most important implications for L2 teaching for the successful acquisition of English diphthongs. For teaching, this means that we have to take into account the balance between accent and intelligibility. The accent of any given L2 speaker comes as a consequence of his or her L1 phonology. In our case, the Colombian Spanish phonology has a series of implications for the L2 accent, the accent the learners will acquire while learning English. The accent is a marker of identity that cannot be erased or altered, or the intention is not to erase or aim or alter this accent. However, it can have an effect on intelligibility, and that's a moment where teachers must take into consideration a series of strategies in order to reduce the effect of L1 phonology upon intelligibility. As we were talking earlier, the consequences of vowel reduction are very important. Since there is no vowel reduction in Spanish, L2 learners tend to carry this absence of vowel reduction into their interlanguage as they are developing their English spoken proficiency. This hypercorrection has effects on both accent and intelligibility. These intelligibility implications are mostly related to speech rhythm and speech rhythm and the how does this affect the connected speech, and how can for example, a native speaker perceive the spoken English of an Colombian of Colombian speaker. And the consequences of vocalic repertoire have to do with also with the notion of interlanguage, since these are sounds that do not exist for the Colombian Spanish learner. He or she tends to take the closest sounds of his or her phonology, L1 phonology, into their interlanguage, and that also can have a series of effects upon intelligibility. Although it has been claimed that the Spanish vocalic system is a system both simple and elegant, and this point, this simplicity has a series of consequences, some of them neutral, if we want to call them like that, and some of them negative when it comes to developing and speaking proficiency. As we were talking earlier, this vocalic repertoire and transfer manifests through the phenomena of substitution and undifferentiation. Learners substitute the vowels they cannot produce while with the sort of closest approximants that they have on their interlanguage. It is a means to compensate the lack of appropriate sounds in Spanish phonology for English diphthongs. Now, what can teachers do about this? Whatever teachers do must take into consideration the fact that any course of action must, as we mentioned earlier, respect the accent intelligibility balance. If we have to increase intelligibility without the sacrificing the accent, and take an approach that varies depending on learner's age. This means that we have to take a approach which is focalized through activities and exercises that are focused on the acquisition of English diphthongs without affecting other effects or consequences of Spanish phonology. Basically, the development of the related sounds, e, the schwa, the u, and the acquisition of vowel reduction, which will help connected speech and intelligibility. The learner's age will always be a variable. Since phonological flexibility changes with age, that is, older learners have a greater difficulty than younger learners to acquire these features, sensible accent goals must be established and sensible phonological goals must be established that take into account the age and capabilities of learners as they are in different stages of their phonological process. This concludes the presentation on diphthong transfer. My name is William Gutierrez, and I thank you for your time.